Welcome in at Big Ten Today. We are fueled by Gatorade. I'm Dave Revson. A happy Thanksgiving Eve to you and yours. Lots to talk about in terms of the festivities for this weekend, and that includes an unbelievable rivalry week. It is quite a weekend buffet of football for us. Ashley Adamson joins me as she does every Wednesday. And Ash, I cannot wait for this football. I don't want to wish away Thanksgiving, best holiday of the year, but man, the football looks great.
Yeah, I'm with you, Dave, and it's always good to be with you. I'm trying to wrap my mind around the fact that this is the last weekend of the regular season. Like I don't know where the time went, but I'm looking forward to Thanksgiving. I am sorry that I'm not dressed in my full turkey regalia that I promised I was going to wear, but maybe I'll bring it into the studio and wear it on Saturday night.
I think that would be great. Yeah, I think a turkey suit on the final drive is just what people are looking for.
Give the people what they want.
It's always been your motto. Let's get into the big story. The CFP committee gave us what we wanted, which was the latest rankings last night. Of course, they were obligated to do that. And the big question from the Big Ten's point of view was where Indiana would end up after its loss to Ohio State. And the answer is they dropped 5 spots to number 10, so still in the bracket, not really in a position to get jumped either. The rest of the Big Ten held steady. Oregon first, Ohio State second, Penn State fourth. Illinois moved up 1 spot to number 23. Now remember, the seeds are different than the rankings due to the fact that the 4 highest ranked conference champs are guaranteed the top 4 seeds. Those 4 projected to be Oregon, Texas, Miami, and Boise State. So Ohio State would be the 5th seed. They would get projected Big 12 champ Arizona State at home. Then they would head to Boise were they to win. Indiana would now have to go on the road. The Hoosiers' opponent would be Penn State, which reinforces the fact that teams from the same conference can play one another in the first round of the CFP. In fact, there'd be 2 such matchups, Tennessee going to Georgia. Actually, let's start with IU. I think they're going to be fine based on where they were. You'd be really nervous if they were 11, 12 as a spot. You certainly don't want to get in because you've got these guaranteed bids for the top 5 conference champs, and certainly it looks like one of them will be ranked below 12. So 10 feels like a safe spot were they to beat Purdue, although I think it wouldn't hurt to beat Purdue handily, but I think a win in Indiana's in.
Yeah, I'm with you. And Dave, this was obviously the thing that we were all really interested to see. What was the committee going to do with Indiana after losing to Ohio State? And I'm sure Hoosier fans should be relieved to see them stay in the top 10, which is absolutely where they should be, especially given the carnage in the SEC. So hat tip to Alabama and Ole Miss. They certainly helped the Hoosiers with their losses this past weekend. But Ward Manuel, the CFP committee chair and Michigan's AD, he spoke highly of IU when he was asked about how the committee views them. He said, look, they were impressed with some of the things that Indiana did in that game against the Buckeyes. They played well, he said, and at times, when you look at overall, their body of work was strong enough to keep them in the top 10. So as long as IU handles Purdue this weekend, I'm with you. I think they're in great shape to make the playoff. Dave, here's the thing that I keep thinking about as I'm looking at this bracket, and we've talked about it a little bit, but as we get closer, it's just worth bringing up again. Oregon is the number 1 seed, may have a harder path than Ohio State at number 2, because as it stands, if the Ducks, win the Big Ten championship, they would get that first round bye, which is great. But then they would likely face Georgia, either Georgia or Tennessee in the quarterfinals. You look at Ohio State's path, or whoever ends up being the 5, they wouldn't get a bye, but they'd get to host a home game against Arizona State, followed by a quarterfinal matchup with Boise. So in a world where the Ducks lose the Big Ten championship in a close game and, I don't know, possibly end up the 5 seed, we might look back and say that was actually the better path. And I think, there's something also about getting to be one of the first teams to ever host a playoff game on campus. So that's one of the things I'm most interested in. What will the committee do with teams that make it to and lose their conference championship? And is being the 5 seed ultimately going to be the better path than the 1?
I agree with you. I think if Oregon and Ohio State both take care of business this week and win their games against Washington and Michigan respectively, I think then we're in a position where the loser of the Big Ten championship game definitely gets that number 5 seed, and the winner of the Big Ten championship game would get the number 1 seed. And I am with you. I am not sure that the 5 seed isn't a better spot to be in. I understand every time you play a game, Ashley, there's a chance that you lose that game. And there's also the wear and tear of football. And so when you have a week off while everyone else is playing and knocking into one another. I do think there is an advantage there to heal up, but I'm with you. I mean, who would not sign up for Arizona State at home and then going to Boise State? Look, I think part of this is due to the fact that the Big 12 just doesn't have a powerhouse team. And I think the assumption was that those Power Four conferences would all have really worthy teams in those top four spots. And again, I'm not saying whoever gets in from the Big 12, assuming they get someone in. And by the way, there is a possibility in all this that the Big 12 gets shut out. I mean, as was pointed out last night,
which is wild.
They are not guaranteed a spot. No power conference is guaranteed a spot. All we know is the top 5 highest ranked conference champs are guaranteed a spot. So who's to say that, for instance, if Tulane finishes up really strong and looks great against Memphis and then blows out Army and the Big 12 has all kinds of chaos, that Tulane wouldn't be the 5th highest ranked team. But I think the assumption was that 5th highest ranked conference champ. But I think the assumption was that all 4 of those teams would be really good teams in that bracket, and then, you know, that you wouldn't be in a path like the one that potentially the 5 seed right now, Ohio State, is looking at, with 2 games that just about anyone would sign up for.
Yeah. No, I'm with you 100%. I think it's going to be really interesting. And again, because this is the first year of the 12-team playoff, that is what makes this so fun. And I know I've said it, but like, now that we're here, this expanded playoff is wonderful. I mean, it has made it so much more interesting, this final, you know, we've never had a month like this in college football, with so many teams that we're talking about and all the different things that could happen, and not to mention the parity in teams that always win, losing games that they don't normally lose. So it has been fun, and it's going to be wild to see what it actually looks like when that final ranking comes out that actually matters on December 8th. I also I want to shout out Brett Bielema's team. You know, Illinois ranked number 23.
Yes.
A win against Northwestern would give them their first 9-win season since, I think, the 07 Rose Bowl team. Kurt Cignetti and Dan Lanning are the front runners for Coach of the Year, I would imagine, but we should not overlook what Bielema has done. So, you know, I think we can continue to talk about these top 4 teams, but Illinois, they've got an impressive resume when you look at the other 3 lost teams that are that are ranked right now. Dave.
I agree with you wholeheartedly. I think they're getting the short shrift. Like, I don't understand why Illinois isn't ranked higher. Like, look at the teams that they've lost to. The teams they've lost to are combined 27-6. I mean, they've lost to 2 teams that are going to for sure be in the playoff. Their other loss is Minnesota, who's really good. They've beaten 3 Power 4 bowl teams. They beat Kansas, who has been incredibly disruptive here and has played really well down the stretch. Like, I guess I don't really understand why we're talking about Illinois at 23. Like, I think Illinois deserves to be much higher. I think they need to be in that conversation of the better 3 lost teams in the country. I understand. I mean, I think the challenge is that among those wins over the bowl teams, the Power 4 bowl teams, I don't think there's anyone that just blows you away. But, man, they've beaten some really good teams along the way. And, again, like, you look at who they've lost to and you look at what the story might be where their schedule a little different. I mean, again, there are the vagaries of scheduling and who you end up playing and who you don't end up playing in conference play. But Illinois is a really good and really worthy team. So I'm glad you brought him up. The other thing I want to say is, I mean, the Indiana-Penn State thing would be fascinating, right, to have what is in essence a conference game, although 2 teams that did not play one another playing in that opening round. But just the notion, again, like, it seems almost certain to me, if Penn State beats Maryland, they're going to host a game in the first round. And you talk about great scenes. State College and Beaver Stadium is one of the best scenes in all of college football. And to have them hosting a game in the college football playoff after all of their close calls of not being able to make it to the playoff through the years, I think that would be a fitting way to get this thing started.
Yeah. Oh, Dave, I'm with you. And, you know, again, it almost all came crashing down at Minnesota last weekend. It's a reminder that it is so hard to win conference games, especially this time of year. But we talked about at the beginning of the season, like Penn State, if the playoff had been 12 teams from the beginning, Penn State would have already made this 6 times, more than any other team. So this is a long time coming, and you hope for their sake that they can go out and have a great showing, you know, against Maryland on senior day. And I know we expect them to. The last thing I would bring up that I think is interesting when you're looking at the standings, USC has a chance to do their new Big Ten brethren a very big favor this week. You know, obviously, if the Trojans find a way to beat Notre Dame on Saturday and knock them out of the CFP, that would give the Big Ten more breathing room. Indiana would obviously benefit as they're 3 spots behind the Irish in the rankings right now. But I also look at that Penn State squad who's sitting at number 4. And I saw some pundits on social media advocating that Notre Dame should be ranked ahead of Penn State, which to that I say you shouldn't lose to NIU, and then we can talk. But the larger point is when you're comparing Penn State and Notre Dame, USC will be their only common opponent,
right,
which is an important data point. So the Nittany Lions needed overtime to beat USC. Let's say Notre Dame blows out USC. Would that give the committee enough to move them ahead of Penn State in the rankings? So I don't want to get too granular when there's a lot of still moving pieces, but the bottom line is I think all of our Big Ten friends should be pulling for Lincoln Riley and the Trojans this weekend. That's
no doubt
at the calls.
I agree. And you look at what USC has done. I mean, being in the lead in every single game in the fourth quarter this year, I don't think it's at all unreasonable. They have ruined some really good Notre Dame seasons through the years.
Yes,
it's
they have.
Huge rivalry, as you know. So we'll talk a little bit more about that one as we continue on the show.